Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something really fundamental, something that touches almost everyone's daily life: housing. We're going to be exploring the confirmation of Scott Turner. He's the new housing secretary for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And this is important, right? It signals a key direction for President Trump's domestic agenda, especially now. I mean, housing affordability, availability, these are just huge national concerns for so many people.
Absolutely. And, people sometimes misunderstand HUD's role. He's got this really broad mandate. Yes, it enforces federal housing law, sure. But the vast majority of its budget, that actually goes towards housing assistance. We're talking lower income families, the elderly, people with disabilities. And critically, it also heads up community development and homelessness programs.
Okay, so it's much more than just handing out vouchers then.
Oh, much more. Think about it. HUD shapes local economies in significant ways. It influences property values, job markets, even the availability of, public services.
Yeah.
So it's really right there at the forefront,
Yeah.
tackling rising housing costs,
Mhm.
trying to spur economic development in struggling cities, lowering homelessness rates, especially among veterans. That's been a big focus.
Right. So to really grasp what this appointment might mean, how it could sort of reshape things, we need to look closer at Scott Turner himself, his background, his path here, and his stated vision, especially for housing shortages and this initiative he was involved with before Opportunity Zones.
Yeah, and as we get into all this, I think it's useful for you listening to maybe think about how federal housing policy connects to your life, directly or indirectly, your rent, maybe, the feel of your community, even just whether there are homes available nearby. These big federal policies often land with very local impacts.
That's a really good point, that grounding in what HUD actually does is key. And it brings us right to the man who's now leading it. So let's dig into Scott Turner's journey, because
Yeah.
his background, his past experiences, they probably give us some clues about how he'll lead, right? So who is Scott Turner? His resume is certainly, well, it's not typical.
Indeed. It's quite unique, actually. Before this, he was a former NFL player, then a Texas state representative,
Uh,
and most recently, he served as a senior aide in the White House.
NFL player to HUD secretary.
Wow. Yeah, and it's interesting. He's actually the second pro football player to lead HUD. Jack Kemp, former representative, was the first. And in this current term, he's the only black American member of President Trump's cabinet. Dr. Ben Carson held that distinction, leading HUD in the first term.
That really is a remarkable path. And what about his goals? He made quite a statement upon confirmation, something about building millions of homes, all kinds of homes, making sure everyone has a roof over their head. That sounds incredibly ambitious.
It is ambitious. And this is where his previous work, the work with the Opportunity Zone program, becomes really relevant, I think. During the first Trump term, Turner was the executive director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council. He oversaw that whole initiative.
Okay, opportunity zones. Remind us quickly what those are.
Sure. So essentially, they're designated low-income areas. The idea is investors can reinvest capital gains profits from other investments into these zones, and in return, they get tax benefits. They can defer or sometimes even reduce the taxes they owe on those gains. It's basically designed to steer private money, private capital, into places that haven't seen much investment.
Got it. So using tax incentives to attract private dollars.
Exactly. And under Turner's leadership at that council, Senator John Barrasso made a notable claim. He said the program had secured $50 billion in private investments to these struggling communities.
50 billion, that's a significant number.
It is. And the core idea here, it's not just about, tax breaks. It's really about using private capital, market incentives, as a tool for social impact. It kind of shifts some of the burden, perhaps, from direct federal spending towards leveraging the private sector.
Right.
And Turner himself talked about this. He testified about seeing firsthand the impact of this initiative.
Yeah.
He said it gave Americans in underserved communities an opportunity, a foundation to start businesses, to live in better homes, to be self-sustaining. So this approach, using private investment for public good, seems likely to be, well, a key part of his strategy for tackling those housing shortages he mentioned.
Okay, so this points towards potentially a different emphasis, maybe. Not relying solely on traditional federal assistance programs, but really leaning into engaging the private sector to get those millions of homes built.
It certainly seems that way, based on his background and his stated priorities.
And that direct link, that intersection between federal policy, tax incentives, and private investment, that's what really shapes things on the ground, doesn't it? the availability of homes, rent costs, the development or lack thereof happening right in your own community.
Absolutely. It connects the policy decisions in Washington directly to local realities.
Mm.
So just to kind of wrap up the main points from our deep dive today, we've seen how crucial the Department of Housing and Urban Development's role is. It tackles these huge nationwide challenges in housing and community development, and Scott Turner's confirmation puts him right at the center of that effort.
Yeah, and as we explored, he brings a very distinct background, doesn't he? From pro football to the Texas legislature, then the White House, now HUD. And his stated commitment is clear: build millions of homes, all kinds of homes, aiming for universal housing security.
And critically, like we just discussed, his past leadership with the Opportunity Zone program really offers a window into his likely strategy. It's about channeling private capital into distressed areas. That claim by Senator Barrasso, $50 billion in private investments secured, really underscores the potential scale of that model, or at least the ambition for it.
Right. So ultimately, what this deep dive really brings home is that housing policy, whichever tools it uses, direct aid, private investment incentives, whatever, it has a profound impact on your rent, on development nearby, on the very fabric of your community.
Exactly. Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to chew on after we're done here. Given Scott Turner's promise to tackle housing shortages and his track record, with opportunity zones, how might that balance play out? The balance between these large-scale private investment initiatives on one hand and direct federal housing assistance on the other. How could that shape the future of housing accessibility, affordability across the country, specifically for you and for your community? Something to think about.